Hello. Today we're talking about user research. We're talking about this because your job is to put together a user experience report, and I want to give you a little bit of background in why user research is important, what it does, what it is, and how you should go about conducting it for your user experience report. So, Simons's book talks about participants and including citizens in the decision making process. And her big thing is thinking about how that strengthens policy by including them in in the decision making process. But her big thing is looking at how we include participants and how is it really inclusive. So on page 2, she says, when I asked about how the decision makers learned of citizens' concerns and feedback, she told me that was not the purpose of the meeting. So this is her talking about the EPA and the nerve agent, the case study that she goes through with her book, and she's talking to the people whose job it is to take citizens' concern, even though that was part of their process, is to talk to citizens in the meeting that she was discussing. The people who conducted the meeting are saying that the purpose wasn't hearing citizens' concerns. So that turns to be like a crucial crux of Simon's work, is how are citizens, and we can extend that to participants or users, included in the decision-making process or included in the website experience or something of that nature. So Simons also talks about what type of interface promotes or prevents citizen participation. And I think that becomes really clear for thinking about a user experience on a website. How does this interface promote or prevent user or citizen or participant participation? And Simon's point is that all participation is not equal. Encouraging citizens to contribute knowledge about how a policy will affect their community at the onset of a decision-making process is quite different from allowing citizens to respond to policies already determined. And so this is about designing systems, and for her, it's designing a feedback and comment policy for the EPA, but it's about designing systems with users and participants at the center. She says at the end of chapter 2, I seek to illuminate a range of examples of specific risk communication practices that will allow me to theorize about why significant participation is often not possible and the ways in which citizens could more specifically participate in the decision of environmental policy. And that's her goal here, is to look at these specific designs of these communication practices, right? As a technical communicator, that's her job, is to think about the ways in which these practices are designed to either include users or not include users, or in any of these different cases. So in like a specific workplace, this might be as a manual writer. You might be a technical communicator who writes a manual, and it might be, how do I make sure that when I do the research with the different departments, I'm including their voices and not just placating to the fact that I have to talk to them. There's a difference, Simons thinks, between real inclusion and making sort of an empty gesture. That is like, okay, I'll talk to these people, but I'm not really going to include them in the process. And that can also translate what I'm arguing in other business practices. So we might see that, for example, on specific websites, government, it could be that you want to follow Simons and look specifically at a government website. It might be that the way that, a customer or a user participates on a government website or contacts someone on a government website is really sort of difficult to navigate. For example, like the contact us stuff. If you've ever tried, for me, I have this example in my head, but Amazon, right? You're ordering something on Amazon and you need help. You need to talk to somebody. It's actually, their site is designed that it's actually really difficult to find a phone number to talk to somebody and get instant gratification in terms of I communicated to somebody. And that's something to think about, right? Similarly, you all read the POTS piece as well, or at least you're in the process of it, the one specific article. She talks about that her viewpoint is that we consider participation across an ecosystem rather than one single website or application, right? Starbucks is an experience. It's not just Starbucks website. It's what you get in the store, what you get on the app, what you get on the website, what they post on Twitter, what they post on Instagram. And she calls this experience architecture. It's not a new term at all. A term meant to complement terms like software architecture, user experience design. Experience architecture is becoming more common in the industry. It describes the role of architecting experiences across applications, websites, and services. So context, thinking about the context, the content, and users, and how all of these different things kind of overlap and come together. So as you're thinking about users, like say, for example, if what you wanted to look at was Starbucks and you wanted to think about how users interact with Starbucks, you could think about the whole experience architecture that Starbucks creates, from their app to their website to what they say on Facebook to what they say on Twitter and what they say on Instagram, how they interact with customers, what's meant by the store, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And POTS kind of expands Simon's view of the participant or the citizen and adds the participant. So terminology-wise, obviously, Simons talks about citizens because she's talking about government and government policy. That is not always applicable when we transition into businesses. Like hospitals are probably talking about patients. They don't want to think about their patients as users, although there's certainly a lot of user experience and experience architecture research being done on the patient experience, right? The little graphics. So these are users and then participants. So the language we use definitely allows us to think about who we're talking about. And Potts makes the case that we should use participants instead of users. I'm fine with you calling what you're doing, whatever. It could be citizen experience data, it could be participant experience data, it could be user experience data. I'm fine with you kind of making the case and calling whatever you're doing either one of them. There's positives and negatives to all of those. They're disciplinary. So, experts could probably argue over this. But whatever the case, I just wanted to be mindful that there's definitely different terms that people use for different reasons. So here are some questions that I think drive user research. There are definitely more than these. Again, your job is to at least look at the website and then the corresponding things that attach to it. So maybe it's a website that's attached to a Twitter and a Facebook. So looking at all three of those platforms and how users are taken into account and represented and meant to participate and do things in those spaces are good for you. You could also, like I said, Starbucks said, you could also, if you're doing a thing that has an app and then as well as like a physical experience, right? That's not a bad thing too. Disneyland has a website. It has the actual park. I'm sure there's other things within the park you could talk about. There are apps connected to Disneyland that help you navigate that experience a little better, that make actually the park a little bit more user-friendly, which is interesting. So the questions that I think guide user research are, who are the users and participants? Like doing a little bit of a demographic data on them, whether you are implying or looking it up. Some of the stuff like Starbucks is for, people who are well off enough for coffee and who like drinks, right? People who need to work and use the internet. So that's students, that's people who are doing mobile businesses, and you can gather some of that. Making not just assumptions, right? But either pulling from data, maybe on the company's website or other people's websites, maybe somebody does demographic research on Starbucks customers, and you're able to pull from that. But just like making the assumption that all Starbucks users are female without anything to back it up is silly. But thinking about what kind of things people go to Starbucks for and assuming that their users all go there for those things. Like I said, they have free Wi-Fi. So who might need free Wi-Fi? Students, people who are traveling for business or who are mobile for business in any capacity, right? So the people who are tethered to a physical office might not need it. It's a meetup place, so it could be people going on dates. Maybe it's a coffee date. It could be people who need to discuss something. People could bring clients there. So those aren't bad assumptions, but just assuming I went to a Starbucks and I saw all women, so only women go to Starbucks, or the majority of Starbucks users are women, would be silly. Now, that said, there are businesses that only cater to women. One of my students did a project on a waxing company that does not wax males. And so her assumption that the users are all female were absolutely, it wasn't an assumption. It was a reality. She even called the places of business to confirm with them. The other question is, what are the needs and the users of participants visiting the website, right? Starbucks, maybe they need to find the location of the place. Being able to answer some of these questions on your own by just navigating the website and putting yourself into the place of the user is some of that just sort of research that you could do. You should be able to know ins and outs of the websites. So what activities are allowed on the website? Like literally navigating every page. I know on Starbucks website I can, order things for pickup at a store. I know I can order order things for gifts, or coffee mugs and coffee beans and things like that. I can apply for a job. I can find a store. I can contact the company. Like being able to figure out those things, and then thinking how users engage with the website. Like the question being, if there's something like really hidden in the website, that might be a question. Like, are the users would a typical user find that? What activities are allowed on the website? What activities are not allowed on the website? I know I was doing my own research on on a website for like it's kind of social fitness website. And one of the things that were not allowed on the website was a messaging app. You could comment on each other's workout, but you couldn't like see that someone ran the same trail as you every day and send them a message and say, hey, I want to run with you, unless you knew them from another social media site, which for me turned out to be a really interesting research project. And then that's the final question is, so what would improve the website for users and participants? So the questions that drive this should be like a really deep dig into who uses the website, how they use it, how is it set up, how does it involve users into it, right? And this could be like, do they like, Wendy's is really big to responding to people on Twitter, to be funny. Sometimes, like Cox, for example, using on their Twitter or Facebook, sometimes if you send them a tweet that's like, hey, you're out in my area, sometimes they also use those social media sites for customer service as well. So knowing that is helpful too. So this should be questions, and I would take these questions and jot them down as sort of your own observational research. A couple other parts would be user profiles. So this is from the other article that you read about user experience at Starbucks. This is one user profile. Here is what they came up with here. This is Nicole. She's a soon-to-be grad. She's single, smart, studious. She studies at Starbucks. She's organized, wants to go to grad school, likes to use a lot of apps. She needs instant gratifications, likes free things, and wants to stay caffeinated, right? Here's another typical user. Michelle, she works at a large sales company. She travels for work, drinks a lot of coffee, doesn't cook too much, eat on the go, relies heavily on their phone, reduce stress, wants her coffee in the morning without dealing with a Starbucks crowd, right? So those user profiles, being able to either imagine your own user or talk to these people would be helpful to understand who are the typical users of your website. And then finally, that's from the running a couple of usability tests. You might do this on your own. You might also have friends or family members do this. This person did a usability test of Starbucks app. So using the personas, I went out to find 6 Starbucks drinkers to run through a usability test. Each user was given questions and scenarios to help me identify their main objective for using the app and pain points within the app. Prior to running through the app, each user was asked what they use the app for, why they would download the app in the first place. Once that was answered, each user was tasked with finding the homepage to order a drink, find a nearby store to order drinks, pick a drink and make modifications, and confirm the order. So maybe the usability test wouldn't be like, I want to know how usable the whole website is. But maybe there's a section on the website that you want to run through with a couple of people to talk about how easily it is to do X, Y, or Z based on these different people. So you might pick a diverse crowd, like you might pick someone really young, like my son is 12, I might pick him, and then my grandma is 85, I might pick her, just to see, and then my parents are in their 60s, so just to see how different demographic groups use the website a little bit different. I would assume that my son could navigate it really easy. My grandmother would be like, what the heck is this? And my parents would navigate it, but have a really hard time. And maybe I'm completely wrong. But that gives you all of these different things. So going over the questions, creating these profiles, and running these usability tests gives you a lot of things to go over and think about when you're crafting your usability experience report or user experience report, to talk about how this website allows for certain communication, doesn't allow for certain communication, and ultimately how it positions. Like, is this a user-heavy, user-friendly, user-centered website, or is this website meant to just get information? Is it just like a one-dimensional website? right? And so we'll probably in our class get a really wide range of things, especially if we pick a wide range of examples. So like maybe someone uses the IRS website. There's from my experience, my limited experience without running all of these things, the IRS website is an informational database, not exactly a place to go where I can ask a bunch of people questions and get answers and all of these things. They do have a lot of tax FAQs and documents that I can look at, but not a lot of the other things that I need. So asking people questions, maybe even group chatting with other people, maybe not tax professionals, but other users, right? Which might be helpful. So anyway, this is what I mean by user research. So in summary, user research involves understanding the user participant, knowing the allowed and disallowed actions on the website, developing user profiles, and running usability tests. I'm looking forward to seeing all of these things evident in your user experience report. Thank you.